You know, when we think about a crime, our minds usually jump to one single dramatic moment. But in the eyes of the law, it's so much more than that. It's the whole story. It's a chain of events, of actions, and words. So how does a court figure out which parts of that story it's actually allowed to hear? Well, let's dive in.
Okay, picture this. It starts with a man buying a knife. Sometime later, there's a desperate scream, and it ends with witnesses frantically running to the police. A crime has clearly happened here, but what's the actual evidence in court? Is it just that final violent act, or is it the entire sequence of events that led up to it? That's the puzzle we're going to solve today.
And to really get how the law untangles this mess, we're going to walk through a story of a murder.
So our story kicks off with person A buying a knife. And he doesn't just buy it, he actually tells the butcher he's planning to kill someone with it. Then he starts asking around, hunting for person B, telling anyone who listens what he's about to do. He finds B and attacks right in front of witnesses. B's screams are heard by even more people who are just passing by. And finally, the eyewitnesses run to file a police report. See, it's not just one moment, it's a whole chain of them, all linked together.
Right, so this chain of events creates a real puzzle for the court when it comes to evidence.
So here's the million-dollar question. Is the only thing that matters in court the attack itself? Or what about that creepy conversation with the butcher, the threats he made? What about the screams that people heard but didn't see? To make sense of all this, the law needs a guiding rule.
And that rule is built around a really powerful legal idea, the concept of the same transaction. This is what ties all those seemingly separate moments together into one story.
Now, the actual legal text is pretty insightful. Check out the key phrases here. So connected and form part of the same transaction. This is really the heart of it. It's saying that if all these different events are linked together so tightly that they basically form a single story, then they are all relevant, and it doesn't matter if they happen at different times or in different places.
Now, there's a famous old Latin term for this principle, res gestae. It literally just means things done. It sounds fancy, but it's a beautifully simple phrase for this big idea, that a court needs to look at everything that was done as part of one continuous event.
So what makes something a transaction? Well, think of it like an unbroken chain. Each link is connected by time, place, and the flow of the action. Buying the knife leads to the search. The search leads to the attack. Every single link helps build the full picture for the court. And this continuity is absolutely crucial because it acts as a safeguard against people just making up stories later on.
But here's where it gets really interesting. This idea actually stretches way beyond the immediate time and place of the crime.
For instance, let's throw a curveball in here. What if our killer had called his brother 2 days before the attack from a totally different city and told him his plan? I mean, there's a huge gap in time and distance there, but that call is directly connected to his motive and intent. It's still part of the same transaction. The psychological connection is just as strong as a physical one.
And this leads us to one of the most powerful consequences of res gestae. So courts usually have this super strict rule against hearsay. Basically, you can't testify about something you only heard someone else say. But res gestae carves out a massive exception. Remember those bystanders who only heard the victim scream? Normally, their testimony would be tossed out. But because that scream is part of the transaction, part of the crime as it's happening, it becomes powerful, admissible evidence. It's not just some random thing they heard, it's part of the event itself.
Okay, so this all sounds good in theory, but it can get pretty tricky in the real world. So how do judges decide where to draw the line? Let's look at a couple of actual cases. Let's go way back to this infamous old case. A woman stumbles out of a room, she's been mortally wounded, and with her last breaths, she names her attacker. But the court rejected her statement. Their reason? She had moved to a different room, so the transaction was, in their very rigid view, over. It's a shocking decision, and today it's pretty much the textbook example of how not to apply this rule.
Now contrast that with a much more modern way of thinking. A woman calls the police, absolutely terrified, and says her husband is about to kill her. Just moments later, he does. The court allowed that phone call as evidence. And why? Because her words were spoken under the immediate, intense pressure of the event. It wasn't a memory she was recalling, she was narrating the crime as it was unfolding.
And what's really great is that the doctrine keeps evolving. Courts now have a much better understanding of trauma. They recognize that for children, or survivors of sexual assault, there can be a delay in speaking out. Shock can literally be silencing.
So in these incredibly sensitive cases, the law has become more flexible and compassionate, realizing that a statement made hours or even days later can still be intimately connected to the original trauma.
So really, it all comes down to a kind of human error test. The law allows for reasonable, understandable delays. Let's go back to our eyewitnesses. If it took them 2 hours to get to a police station that's only 30 minutes away, a court would probably get it. They just saw their friend murdered. They'd be in shock. But what if they waited a month? Well, that long, unexplained gap breaks the chain. It creates too much time for stories to change or for a conspiracy to be cooked up.
So after all of this, what's the ultimate goal here? It's really all about one thing: seeing the complete picture.
And this is why this whole idea is so incredibly important. It lets the court hear the entire narrative of a crime, weaving together all the actions, the words, the events into one single story. It stops crucial pieces of context from being thrown out on some technicality. At the end of the day, it's all about finding the comprehensive truth, not just looking at a single isolated snapshot of the crime.
Which of course leaves us with one last fascinating question to chew on. If the law insists on hearing the whole story, then we have to ask ourselves, where does any story truly begin, and where does it actually end? That's the challenge right at the heart of this powerful legal idea.